Hello and welcome back to another new edition of Windows and Current Affairs, and today we continue our embark over entrepreneurship and youth and the different fields that would qualify and empower and enforce youth to be the future leaders. Of course, youth are full of ideas. They have full packages of new innovations and new initiatives and new projects for the future, and that's why training them and qualifying them for the future becomes a very important must. And we're very delighted to be having with us live here in the studio Engineer Ashraf Tawakkol. He's entrepreneurship and innovation consultant. Good evening, Engineer Tawakkol. Let's first talk about youth and entrepreneurship and the government's efforts and plan to be able to train about or around 1 million of the youth to be able to participate in development and sustainable development in the near future.
Well, first of all, of course, the government is fully aware about the importance of entrepreneurship to the social and economic aspect in the country. And I usually, when I mentor and coach entrepreneurs, I tell everybody that entrepreneurship is the main catalyst for development. For any nation that wants to move on forward, entrepreneurship comes very, very important, because we always coin entrepreneurship along with innovation, and innovation is all about change. And change takes time. Of course, numbers are sometimes needed, and we have to put KPIs, but regardless of the number of the 1 million, it's not just the number. The importance is the impact these young people can do to the social life and the economic field in Egypt. Because it's everywhere now because of COVID-19 that every nation and every country is looking differently now on entrepreneurship. We're giving it more a sustainable look. We now know for sure that we've been harming Earth, we've been damaging our environment, and it's not just about the environment, it's about people and collaboration with people. And again, the government is very much aware of that, and there is a lot of initiatives going in this direction. When we talk about qualifying entrepreneurs, it's a difficult task, because it's not just about training. It's about qualifying them to understand the change that is happening around them in the country. And for the good and for the bad, there are of course some negative results, but it's good opportunity that we are witnessing this in the midst of the pandemic. Because we're not out of the pandemic yet. And everybody who is in the economic field understands very well that post-pandemic, in a couple of years, is not going to be like what we had before the pandemic. Opportunities are different. The most important thing, the behavior of nations are changing. Exactly. Because the pandemic implied a lot of fear, and that fear is not going to go away in a day and a night.
And a lot of experience also.
And a lot of experience, and a lot of aspects change. I'll give you an instance without mentioning names, but I don't believe conferences are going to go back in the same amount of live conferences as they used to happen before. Office buildings are already seeing office real estate is seeing a downturn everywhere in the world. Not because we're not going to work, because finally works understood that they don't have to have people in the office to get them to work. They can work remotely, and they work remotely brilliantly for almost 2 years now. So why should I bear a very high cost on my bill as a company for renting or owning a building? So now it's a trend. Everybody is planning after the pandemic to work in what we call a hybrid mode. So they are planning. This means that the demand that was just 2 years ago very high on office space is diminishing, and it's not going to go back. So what the pandemic is doing to us is it's changing the behaviors of every context, every locale. Of course, behaviors in Egypt change differently than in the States, than in Germany, than in England, than in Africa, but it's changing.
Exactly.
And that change, although some people see it bad, for youth, it's a great opportunity because innovation lies in the change. That's
Exactly.
where the ideas come from.
You raised a very important point, which is the post-pandemic phase,
Yes.
and how important is it on both levels to humanity at large. When we talk about the post-pandemic phase, we talk about the fears, we talk about the experiences, and we talk about the lessons.
Yes.
If you'd like to elaborate on that very important phase.
Okay. The main lesson that we understood, I think, as a global community, globally, is that the importance of infrastructure, with its, I call it trifold, technology, education, and health, is vital. And no matter all the progress, even the biggest countries like the US thought they had advances in this part. The pandemic proved them all wrong. It proved us all wrong. So now a lot of effort is being put into adjusting that. And now the actual vision is different. We are talking about what we like to call in the chatter on economic forums and entrepreneurship forums, we talk about humanity 2.0 after the pandemic. We have to change, and we will change almost 180 degrees. Now, governments all over the world are more concerned with health and education like never before. Everybody's more concerned with youth, yet making use of the expertise of the elders. So there is a major shift in the paradigm of how we want to govern our life as citizens in the coming future. It's not going to happen tomorrow. I believe the very optimistic views is that the pandemic, we will not be in the post-pandemic period before early 2024. Because hopefully, inshallah, we hope, if everybody just take the vaccine and stop listening to rumors, and people really take care with wearing the masks, keeping distances for some time, hopefully we will start getting into the rollback of the life. The vaccines will start working, and this is going to take time. We are not the biggest nation in the world, but we are over 100 million.
But we're one of the best.
Well, we're one of the best, but I'm talking about the vaccination. We will only get 40% of the population, hopefully, before the end of the year. So it needs commitment from the people. It's not on the government. It needs commitment from the people so that we can pass this thing. In that time, my concern with all the entrepreneurs that I work with is teaching them how to look, to forget about the ideas, because the ideas of the past are not going to work in this future.
Definitely.
What is really important for them is to understand insights, how to look at the information we have. And they are very lucky, this generation, they have the information on their phone. They don't even have to sit on a computer. They have everything at their fingertips. They need to go down to the street with the precautions, of course. Look at the people. They need to do research. They need to understand how the people are changing. What are the most important areas that are changing in the life of the Egyptians, in the life of the Arabs, in the lives of the Africans? Because this is our immediate region. That's where our entrepreneurs can expand into. We don't just want them to work in Egypt. There are a lot of problems in Egypt that solving it with entrepreneurship opens for them doors to go out to Africa. Africa is a huge market.
Exactly.
Huge market.
But you also talked about the regardless, of course, regarding the pandemic and post phase of the pandemic and the experiences and lessons. Also, excuse me, amongst the lessons that we have taken from the pandemic is try to reconsider our priorities.
Yes.
The dramatic change in our priorities, how do we arrange we had a rearrange of our priorities, and instead of, for example, putting at the forefront of our priorities military equipment, we have been replacing it with how to take heed of respecting the environment and the environmental needs, and learn more and set awareness about the environment and about how to sustain our development goals, sustainable development goals, and things like that. Talk to us about the importance of that notion to people.
Of course, there's a lot of talk. I don't think we've seen any proven reports or papers that has been published that proves this, but yet a lot of nations are really investigating in that. But a lot of people dealing with the environmental change believe that one of the major reasons that helped the virus to spread and mutate in the way it mutates is the level of pollution, the level of ignorance in the societies, the level worldwide, not just in Egypt. We are very lucky, actually. We are one of the luckiest countries, I believe, in the world.
And disturbing the biological balance.
And disturbing the biological balance. So I'm known among my entrepreneurs for the last 10 years. I was not very much a fan of somebody coming to me and telling me, I'm doing a startup that is going to take care of the waste. Because that startup is going to depend on funds. That startup is not going to be actually working for making money. And we have to understand that entrepreneurship, in all cases, and businesses, is a capital activity. You have to earn money, otherwise you're not going to sustain. Until 2 years ago, when I started more going into the new movement of green is different. Green talks about what we call a triple bottom line. This is one of the lessons that we learned effectively. We were talking about it 2 years ago, but it's very, very important now. We stress it very hard in entrepreneurship, being a green entrepreneur. A green entrepreneur has a triple bottom line. What we mean, a bottom line usually is his net losses or his net profit. Now we talk about a triple bottom. Number one, you have to be profitable. You have to work to be profitable. But number two, you have to have a positive impact on the environment, and you have to have a positive impact on the community, socially. That movement is taking other organizations, non-profit organizations across the world to start even thinking differently about the employees in the company. I'm very, very honored that I had, through one of the programs supported in Egypt by the European Union and the United Nations, to work with some of the best entrepreneurs in the green field. Very, very talented young people from different governorates in Egypt. I had the privilege to work with 2 cohorts of them over the last 3 months, coaching them and training them on their startups and on their ideas. And the level of enthusiasm and understanding of these young people in the number of problems they want to tackle is impressive. Some of them is trying, finally, for a change, to produce a more environmental friendly brick that is made out of waste, so we eliminate waste, but more importantly, it preserves our humanity in buildings. It keeps out heat and it keeps out cold. The current brick that we have, that we are building with, doesn't even qualify to be a shelter. In summer, you have it like an oven. In winter, it's colder than a freezer. So I have another startup that is working on recycling the banana leaves. Because in Upper Egypt, we have a lot of banana leaves. And they only get burned or dumped in the...
Burning them in its own right is
a catastrophe. And dumping them in the Nile is a catastrophe, another catastrophe. So this guy has a very nice model. He convinced people in Upper Egypt to let their girls work with him. And he trained them to take the leaves, treat it, and turn it to a local alternative for the old bamboo that we import with a very, very high cost. Suddenly, they have very nice
innovative
products.
ideas.
Very, very
Also,
innovative.
one of the main priorities before the leaves of the bananas and the bricks and these very important ideas is setting awareness about the importance of not harming the environment by using toxics, by using the pesticides, by using the strychnine poison to poison the stray dogs in the streets, and
there is a problem here.
kill different species and get rid of species
100%
on the
agree with
extent of other species, and eradicating the green areas and building in front of them. I mean, deforestation. These are very important.
The problem here,
and they were the reason for the pandemic.
They were parts of the reason for the pandemic.
They were the
I'm
reason
sure,
for
yes,
climate change, and
climate change. I agree with you
was
100%.
the foundation of the evolution of SARS, and you know,
that's why I started my talk with you about part of what we really need to educate entrepreneurs when we prepare them is to be people friendly, because the change they want to apply will apply on those people, on those users, and thus those users are only concerned about their daily life. I will give you an example, because I worked with a couple of startups in the last 3 years, and they were introducing a new fertilizer, a completely organic, chemical-free fertilizer, and then they didn't sell. So I told them, you have to go down and talk with people why they're not buying. And I went to them in one of the villages, we went down, we talked with people, I showed them how we talk with people. And when you don't sell somebody something and you lead with that person, this is how we want to do it, with stories, and you get him to tell you, believe it or not, chemicals doubles his scope, and he needs money.
It doubles his score, but
it doubles his score, but it will. I understand.
It does not give him quality, and
it does not give him quality.
The best example for that is that here we have the organic
exactly.
food.
So it's the entire ecosystem. So for us to do that, we have to sell them what they want. That's the role of the entrepreneur. That's the only way of change. It's not just about. It's not just about making people or lecturing them and making awareness. That's the part of media, and that's the part
sorting out their problems and convincing them.
Exactly. I'll give you an example, a very, very famous example. Henry Ford, when he first made the car, he had a very famous quote that I use all the time with entrepreneurs. He said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. They would have not accepted the car. The car is evil. The car is mechanical. And they love the horses. Horses is prestigious. It's status. If I go to my work in a carrot with 4 horses, that means I have a stable with 20 horses. Oh, I'm a rich man. It's status. But the real problem when he noticed was that horses cannot maintain acceleration. That's the insight. That's what the entrepreneurs have to really think of, not the idea. Is that horses don't accelerate. They can run for some time, but they are moody. They will stop. So what he did is he made the car. And the most important innovation in the car was not the engine. The engine was invented way years before he introduced the car.
You could have used a more humane way of explaining it to humanity, like it's more humane to use an engine than to use the living creatures to use them forever.
He built the first car.
But he wouldn't convince humanity, I know.
Yeah, he built the first car exactly as a carrot, but without horses. If you look at the very first models of the Ford car, and then he went and told them, you see, this car
it's the speed of like
equals 20 horses, and they don't get tired. So people started thinking. So he sold to them on their problem, and strange enough, this is the only analogy in mechanical engineering that didn't change. We use it until now, even with air conditions. You get what I mean?
Right. We're going to go to a short break right now, and we'll come to continue this very interesting topic so stay with us. Welcome back, and we're still talking about entrepreneurship and innovations. Again, I insist on innovations, and also preparing the near future for a better world, right?
Yes, of course.
A better world means that you were talking about a very important concept also, which is when you set awareness, you set the right awareness for the right society.
Yes.
Sometimes you're speaking in a fair way, but probably the way you transfer it to people is not right, or maybe you are transferring it to the wrong people. Sometimes you need to adjust this type of awareness to be able to comply with their language.
Yes.
And their intellectual, cultural background.
Yes. In business, we
How
call
do
this
you do that?
marketing. In business, we call this marketing. Marketing is different than communication. Unfortunately, most of the entrepreneurs that we deal with are coming still young, ambitious, enthusiastic. They don't really understand the difference between communication and marketing. Communication is about conveying a message, but marketing is about which message. Which message should we get out, and to whom? And that's exactly what I was telling you. One of the startups, you don't need to say that you are organic. It's enough to say that it is clean and fresh. And then, without taking the organic part, you're doing it green. We know you're doing it green. You don't need a certificate to say that. But you can maintain a good margin and a good price. That's marketing. And then talking to the right people. And if they're only looking for convenience, I will give them convenience, but I will give them clean food. Now, day over day, these people understand that this is clean vegetables. They will not go back, and they will command clean vegetables. So then clean vegetables, so-called organic, will expand. See, the problem is that change takes time. And changing to green is going to take time. But what everybody is trying to do, including us in Egypt here, I believe on the governmental level and on the private sector level, is trying to capitalize on the amount of fear that has been dispersed in the communities because of COVID. And it's not just about COVID. Everybody, when we talk even in scientific meetings, we say, well, it's not just about COVID. We were sitting fine and clean and everything, and suddenly this COVID came up. Even when COVID goes, do we guarantee that another virus is not going to come up?
Can I get in here? Was COVID sign? No, it was not sudden, because COVID is an evolution of SARS, and it became COVID-19. So yes, there is a possibility that COVID is going to evolve into another pandemic in like 20 or 50 years, or even 6 years.
Mutated has never happened before. That's the problem. That's what is making everybody.
Which would lead us to the idea of rooting, of course,
we have to.
And setting awareness about climate change, and teaching people what is climate change and how to be able to control this.
Look at our last winter.
It's not all about climate.
I'm just giving you an example.
It's just a reason for
I'll
things.
give you another example. Last October, I was in Siwa. Looking on inspecting some projects. What can we do there? I had some ideas about local areas, and we were looking at that. And suddenly, the local guy, I spotted something very weird. I started seeing those ugly white sand blocks, buildings, and cement. They told him, what's going wrong? I know that you always had a salty brick that you do, and it's very good for the environment. It's green. It isolates temperature because they have very harsh winters, they have very hot summers. And you guys are gonna die inside these buildings. And he told me we used it for centuries because we never had rain. For the last 3 years, we are having continuous rain in the winter. And those bricks were not designed, they are using salt. They were good as far as we didn't have rain. So look how climate change is affecting an entire culture. So that's an area of innovation. Instead of leaving them to build cement, concrete, and those white sand blocks, get an entrepreneur down there, a couple of entrepreneurs, to see how they can accommodate that brick and teach them how to make it, with maybe burning, with adding a small additive, changing the way of its composition so it doesn't get affected with water.
You raised a very important point also, which is you might have ideas and you might have plans and you might be very well cultural background and very well educated, but at the same time, if you lack the sense of transferring all that,
Yes,
or delivering this message, then you
see,
didn't
this is
achieve
where
anything.
I come from.
How do you work on this thing?
Yeah, I come from a design background. I usually was an architect, and then I moved in my early life from architecture into urban design and urban development. That's what got me into economic development and entrepreneurship for so many years. In design, there are two types of design. There is an artistic design, which most of people go with, and there is another type of design that we use in urban development and in planning, and we call it human-centered design.
Human-centered.
Human-centered. Human-centered design evolved over the years, and in 2004 was coined a terminology called design thinking. Design thinking is meant as a framework for entrepreneurs and business people to use on smaller scales where they can't afford to hire a highly paid rate consultancy office. So we want them to think as designers think. Okay. Now, the first step we do as designers is empathy. We call it empathy. Our main research we do before we introduce any new product is to thoroughly research and live and understand the people we're designing for. This empathy means put yourself in his shoes. We observe them. We don't just go and make market research, tell them, you want this, you want that. Remember Henry Ford said, if I asked them, they would have told me faster horses. They don't know what they don't. It's my job to innovate. They will not innovate. They want a faster horse. It's my role to understand why they want a faster horse, give them an alternative to a faster horse, and because I understand why they want it, to present it to them. I teach my students and my entrepreneurs and my colleagues a very important, simple phrase. I tell them, you want to sell it right? Think like this. Who does what, how, and why? Concentrate from the very beginning. When you're studying the customers you want to sell them, most probably they're doing what you want to give them now with a way or another. They're building with bricks. They are burning banana leaves. They're doing something. Think of it. Who is doing what, how, and why?
And there is also the...
When you understand this, you will sell them anything.
There is also the role of enforcing the law. Things has to be taken sometimes by harshening the rules.
I'm a big fan of having jurisdictional systems in place.
Yes.
But from a development point of view, I don't see that worked for Egypt very well in the past years. We forced them back in the 60s to live in houses without the barns because it's not healthy. 2 months down the road, they abandoned their village and they went and lived in the barns. We forced them to stop doing bricks from the agricultural land by law, but we never gave them an alternative. Alternatives has to be there before you force the law. Because when we left them without entrepreneurs, without innovation,
so you don't blame it over the law. It's
not the law. It's about the entire community. The entire system was not ready by that time. But now, if we want to enforce something by law, we need to prepare some entrepreneurship, some programs,
a whole study over
the whole study, so that people can provide them with alternatives.
Right. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Engineer Ashraf Mohammed Tawakkol, you are an entrepreneurship and innovation consultant. Thank you so much.
More than welcome.
And hopefully we could have you on another episode
to
be able to cover up the rest of this very important topic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
I guess this would bring us to the end of this edition of Windows and Current Affairs. Many thanks to all of you. Until we see you once again next week, that's a goodbye.